face a brand new chart for the head and for the heart. It's your journey, your tools.
So imagine someone you love is just sitting across from you, right?
Right.
And they are really upset. Maybe they're even crying, just venting about an incredibly stressful situation at work, or, I don't know, a bad conflict with their family.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Exactly. And your immediate instinct, the one that kicks in before you even really realize it, is to offer a solution.
Yes, the fix.
Right. You just want to give them this perfect piece of advice to, make the pain stop, to just fix it. But, and this is what we're getting into today, what if that urge, that burning desire to solve their problem is actually just your own biology being, well, incredibly selfish?
I know, it is a really harsh reality to confront.
Yeah.
Because we are just so conditioned to believe that stepping in with a solution is the ultimate act of care. Like, that's what good friends do.
Right. That's the script we're handed.
Exactly. But underneath that supposedly noble intention, your nervous system is actually often just panicking. It is experiencing extreme discomfort from witnessing their pain, and it is frantically trying to shut down the source of that discomfort so that you can feel better.
Which is just, that completely flips the script on what it means to be a supportive partner or friend. So welcome to the deep dive, everyone.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this one.
Me too. We're tackling the Fix It Reflex today. And the mission for this deep dive is to, totally dismantle that urge, right? We want to understand the raw neurobiology of why we do it.
And, more importantly, to equip you with the actual tools required for profound connection.
Exactly. Because, if you're listening to this, you might think you are failing as a friend if you can't instantly offer the perfect solution to someone's pain.
But the science we were unpacking today reveals that you already possess the exact neurobiological equipment required to help them.
Yes.
You really don't need to be a fixer. You just need to understand your own brain.
Which is incredibly empowering, but it requires moving away from this reactive, ego-driven problem-solving state.
Right. We need to transition into a scientifically backed state of emotional validation.
Because when you finally understand the biology of what is actually happening in the brain and the body when someone, cries on your shoulder, it changes every single aspect of how you respond.
It really does. Everything shifts.
So I want to start with the reflex itself, because it is just so universal. Everyone listening has done this, and everyone has definitely been on the receiving end of it.
Oh, absolutely.
And in the clinical world, this is a very well-documented phenomenon, right?
Yes, it is. If we look at the origins of motivational interviewing, which is a clinical framework developed by psychologists William Miller and Stephen Rolnick, they coined a really specific term for this.
Okay, what is it?
They call it the writing reflex.
Writing, as in making things right.
Yes, exactly. Writing with an R. It is the overwhelming, almost compulsive desire to fix what appears to be wrong with someone and to promptly set them on a better course.
It sounds so incredibly paternalistic when you phrase it that way.
Right. It really does.
But in the moment, it doesn't feel paternalistic at all. It feels like love.
Yeah.
It feels like, I have the answer that will stop your suffering, so let me just give it to you.
And that is exactly the trap, because it does come from a place of genuine care.
Okay.
But Miller and Rolnick discovered something fascinating. Initially, this was in their work with addiction counseling, but it was later applied universally.
Right, because human behavior is human behavior.
Exactly. They found that when you rely heavily on directing, advising, and instructing someone who is in a state of distress or ambivalence, you actually work against their intrinsic motivation to change.
Wait, really? So giving advice makes them not want to change?
Yes. You trigger a deeply defensive psychological response.
Okay, let's play this out, because I think people need to really feel how this works in real life.
Sure.
Let's say my friend is upset about their job. They are exhausted. They feel totally unappreciated by their boss, and they are just venting to me over coffee.
A classic scenario.
Right. So if I immediately jump in and say, you know what, you just need to update your resume, set up a meeting with HR, and just start looking for something else.
Right.
I feel like I'm giving them a literal roadmap out of their misery. But you are saying I'm actually making them defensive.
Absolutely. Because you have just unilaterally taken on the role of the authoritative problem solver.
Wow. Okay.
And in doing so, you inadvertently force your friend to take up the opposing side of the argument.
Because I took the fix-it side.
Exactly. In the terminology of motivational interviewing, your writing reflex actively generates what they call sustain talk.
Sustain talk, meaning like they start arguing to sustain the very problem they were just complaining about.
Precisely. Just think about how your friend would likely respond to that resume advice.
Yeah, they wouldn't say, "You're right, I'll do it tonight."
No, not at all. They are much more likely to say, well, it's not that easy. You know, the job market is terrible right now. I don't have time to interview, and my boss isn't terrible all the time.
Wow, yes. I've had that exact conversation.
We all have.
It is maddening. I sit there thinking, why are you defending the job you were literally just crying about?
Right. And they are defending it because human beings have a fundamental need for autonomy.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. When someone is in a state of ambivalence, which means feeling two conflicting things at once, like hating their job but fearing the unknown of quitting, they really need to process both sides.
But if I jump in and champion the quitting side,
Then their psychological instinct is to balance the scales by championing the staying side.
oh my God.
You tried to fix it, and the psychological mechanics of the interaction basically force them to justify why they are stuck.
So by trying to be the hero, I basically backed them into a corner where they had to defend their own misery.
Unfortunately, yes.
That is wild. And it stems from this mindset we adopt without even really realizing it.
Yeah.
We become what you called problem detectors.
Yes, the problem detector mindset, it is incredibly pervasive.
Right.
When you operate this way, you are not actually listening to the
You were
person.
just scanning.
Exactly. You are scanning the conversational environment purely to identify pathology. You know, you are looking for the broken mechanism so you can select the most efficient tool from your mental workbench to just eradicate the issue and move on.
But human emotion isn't a broken engine part.
No, it's not.
When you scan a conversation just looking for the error to correct, you miss all the nuance. You miss the underlying fear, the identity crisis, the complex layers of what they are experiencing.
You really do. You deny them the fundamental human experience of just showing up, being raw, and being fully accepted without being treated as a project.
A project. That's exactly what it feels like. And we have to recognize that this behavior doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right?
No, definitely not.
We exist in a cultural context that intensely fuels this problem detector mindset. I mean, we live in a pervasive fix-it culture,
We absolutely do.
which treats negative emotions as if they are illegal. The modern world just demands immediate eradication of any feeling that isn't productive or happy.
Exactly. Our entire societal framework operates on the implicit assumption that there is something fundamentally abnormal or even dangerous about experiencing negative affective states.
Right, like sadness is a disease.
Yes. We are conditioned from a very young age to avoid feeling bad at all costs.
Yeah.
We expect instantaneous medications for discomfort, immediate strategic plans for anxiety, and rapid-fire life hacks for sadness. Society basically pathologizes the natural spectrum of human emotion.
Which places a massive burden on the listener.
A huge burden.
If you are listening to this deep dive right now, just think about the immense pressure you feel when your partner comes home and bursts into tears.
It's palpable.
That pressure in your chest to produce a tangible result, to offer the golden piece of advice that makes their tears stop. That isn't a personal failing on your part.
No, not at all.
It is a conditioned societal response. We have been taught that our value as a friend or a partner or parent is tied directly to our utility.
That is so true. That culturally mandated pressure to be useful means that when someone shares a deeply painful narrative with you and you fail to provide a quote-unquote fix, you interpret that internally as a failure of your own worth.
You feel inadequate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you intervene. You start issuing instructions because you feel culturally prescribed to demonstrate competence.
I love this analogy we were talking about earlier. It's like someone comes up to you and they have a deep cut on their arm and they are bleeding.
Right.
And instead of handing them a bandage or honestly just sitting with them and holding their uninjured hand while they cry, we hand them a metaphorical hammer.
Good hammer.
And we start loudly explaining the structural blueprints of how to build a safer house so they don't get cut next time.
It's wild when you put it like that.
It's completely mismatched to the reality of the moment.
The hammer analogy perfectly captures the absurdity of it. But to truly dismantle this reflex, we have to look deeper than just the cultural conditioning.
Okay, deeper how?
Because the urge to hand them that hammer is also driven by a profound, automatic biological imperative.
Okay, this is the plot twist that completely changed how I view empathy.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Because we tend to think of empathy as this purely angelic, selfless trait, right? But the biology tells a much more complicated and honestly a much more self-serving story.
It does. To understand the urgency and almost frantic nature of the writing reflex, we really have to examine the physiological toll that witnessing pain exacts upon the listener.
Okay.
Because the brain does not process the speaker's words like a computer processing raw text data.
What does it do?
It physically simulates their emotional state.
Can you break down exactly how that works? Because we hear the phrase, I feel your pain all the time, but what is actually happening in the nervous system?
Sure. So social neuroscience research demonstrates a phenomenon called empathic resonance or neural mirroring.
Neural mirroring, okay.
Yeah. When you witness or even just listen to someone experiencing emotional distress, specific neural networks within your own brain begin to fire in patterns that closely mirror the observed distress.
So my brain is essentially running a literal simulation program of my friend's anxiety.
Yes.
That is crazy.
And while this neural mirroring is the biological foundation of human connection, I mean, it's how we bond, it carries a severe physiological cost.
Right.
Raw empathy recruits the negative emotional networks within your brain. Your amygdala, which functions as your brain's primary threat detection center, it activates.
Let's pause on the amygdala for a second. For someone who isn't steeped in neuroscience, how should we conceptualize what the amygdala is actually doing in that moment?
Think of the amygdala as your biological alarm system.
Okay.
Its primary job is to keep you alive by detecting danger. So when your friend is sobbing about a devastating breakup, your amygdala doesn't distinguish between their emotional pain and a physical threat to your own survival.
Wait, really? It can't tell the difference?
No. It interprets the heavy emotional atmosphere as a sign of literal danger. Consequently, your nervous system starts mounting a defense.
So I am sitting on my living room couch, completely safe, holding a mug of tea, listening to my friend cry. But my nervous system is acting like there is a predator in the room.
Exactly. A bear in the living room.
Oh my gosh.
You might not consciously realize it, but you are experiencing an accelerated heart rate. Your breathing becomes shallower.
Wow.
Your body releases a surge of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. You enter an acute state of physiological arousal.
Just from listening.
Just from listening.
Mm-hmm.
In clinical terms, this state of shared negative arousal is classified as vicarious distress.
Okay, I want to push back on this a little bit, or at least play devil's advocate.
Go for it.
Because I really struggle with this. If my partner is stressed about finances and they are spiraling, jumping in to help them create a budget feels like the loving thing to do.
Of course it does.
So are you saying that when I'm scrambling to fix their problem, my brain is actually just being selfish?
It is super uncomfortable to admit, but from a purely biological standpoint, yes.
Wow.
We have to look at something called the Holian tension reduction model.
Okay, let's unpack that. What is the Holian tension reduction model?
So Clark Hull was an influential psychologist who proposed that biological needs create a state of tension or drive within an organism.
Okay.
The organism is then motivated to engage in behaviors that reduce that tension and return the system to homeostasis or, balance.
Right.
Think of it like holding your breath. The longer you hold it, the more physical tension builds up until your body overwhelmingly compels you to exhale and reduce that tension.
So how does holding your breath apply to listening to someone vent?
Well, when your brain is flooded with the stress hormones generated by that empathic resonance we talked about, it creates a massive amount of internal physiological tension.
Oh, I see.
Your nervous system is highly dysregulated. The Holian model, when applied to modern theories of altruism, reveals that this personal distress evokes an egoistic motivation to reduce your own aversive arousal.
So my brain desperately wants to stop feeling the tension of the predator in the room.
Exactly.
And what is the fastest way for my brain to neutralize that threat and stop feeling the tension?
By eliminating the source of the distress,
Which is my friend.
which is your friends crying.
Oh, wow.
Your brain rushes to solve their problem, leaping to logical conclusions and formulating strategic plans in a frantic attempt to stop the speaker from emoting.
That is just, wow.
You want them to stop crying, not primarily because you want them to be happy, but because their crying is physically dysregulating your own nervous system.
That is heavy. So my writing reflex, my brilliant advice about their resume or their budget, it isn't me being wise.
No.
It's a biological escape hatch. It is my nervous system throwing a life raft to itself.
It is absolutely a defense mechanism. And this raises a critical point about the dangers of unchecked, raw empathy.
Right.
When you constantly absorb the negative arousal of others without boundaries, the burden of that continuous physiological monitoring deeply depletes your cognitive resources.
And that leads to things like burnout, right? I know the clinical research mentions terms like compassion fatigue and identity fusion.
Yes.
What does identity fusion actually look like in practice?
Well, empathic overwhelm is most likely to occur when the psychological boundaries between self and other begin to blur. That is identity fusion.
Okay.
Your nervous system literally loses track of whose feelings belong to whom. You absorb your friend's despair as if it were entirely your own.
And because it feels like your own, the urgency to fix it becomes absolute.
Exactly. You become completely enmeshed.
I think a lot of people listening to this deep dive right now are having a profound light bulb moment and honestly maybe feeling a little defensive themselves.
It's very confronting.
It is shocking to hear that trying to help is rooted in a biological drive to escape discomfort. But we need to make something very clear to the listener.
Yes, please.
The research explicitly states that understanding this biological reality removes the moral judgment from the fix-it reflex.
That is paramount. You should not feel guilty for having the righting reflex.
It's not a character flaw.
It is not a character flaw. It is a highly predictable, deeply wired evolutionary response designed to protect you from sustained distress.
Right.
However, while we remove the moral judgment, we must also frankly acknowledge the outcome.
Which is what?
This reflex entirely bypasses the needs of the distressed individual. By rushing to fix the problem to soothe your own anxiety, you accidentally leave the speaker feeling isolated, misunderstood, and totally invalidated in their moment of greatest vulnerability.
So if fixing is the biological escape hatch, what is the actual intervention? I mean, how do we stop running away from the discomfort and genuinely help them?
We have to completely reframe our internal narrative. We have to move away from the anxiety-inducing mandate of "I must fix this problem" and embrace the scientifically grounded reality that listening is the neurological intervention.
I love this. I really do. Because it proves that you, sitting there, seemingly doing nothing but listening, are actually actively constructing the exact neurobiological environment required for that person to heal. You aren't being passive. You are administering medicine. And we can see this clearly through the neuroscience of affect labeling.
This is where the neurobiology becomes incredibly actionable. Dr. Matthew Lieberman and his colleagues at UCLA have conducted extensive functional MRI studies, fMRI, on the mechanisms of emotional regulation.
And what did they focus on?
They focused on a practice called affect labeling, which is just the simple act of naming and validating an emotion.
Okay, walk us through the mechanics of that. When someone is just drowning in raw emotion, what is happening in their brain before we intervene?
When an individual is overwhelmed by a raw, unlabeled emotional experience, say pure panic or profound grief, their amygdala is in a state of hyperarousal,
It's just firing constantly.
firing rapidly, flooding the body with stress signals. And concurrently, their prefrontal cortex effectively goes offline.
And the prefrontal cortex is the rational center, right? It governs executive functioning, logical thought, planning, and impulse control.
Correct. So neurologically speaking, when they are in that flooded state, they are reacting purely to emotional stimuli without the physiological capacity for higher order cognitive processing.
Wow.
They literally cannot access the part of their brain required to solve their own problem.
I think of it like this. Tell me if this tracks. Imagine that person's brain is someone stumbling blindly in a dark, terrifying room.
Okay.
They keep bumping into the furniture, they are bruised, they are panicked. When we use the righting reflex, when we offer immediate solutions, we're basically standing outside that dark room, shouting instructions through the door on how to rearrange the furniture.
Yes.
But they can't even see the furniture.
That is a highly accurate conceptualization.
Yeah.
You are appealing to a logical processing center that is temporarily unavailable.
But by validating them,
Yeah.
by helping them name their emotion and saying, you are terrified right now and that makes sense, you aren't fixing the room. You aren't moving the furniture for them. You are acting as the external switch to turn on the lights, so their own prefrontal cortex can come back online and they can see what to do themselves.
And Dr. Lieberman's fMRI data visually demonstrates that light switch turning on.
Really? You can see it?
Yes. Translating a raw, chaotic emotion into concrete language requires the activation of the left hemisphere of the brain, which governs verbal and linguistic processing.
Right.
Language requires order, sequence, and logic. So by forcing the brain to find the precise word for a feeling, you literally pull neurological resources away from the panicked amygdala and route them toward the rational prefrontal cortex.
Why does language do that specifically? Like, what is the exact mechanism?
Because you cannot linguistically articulate a concept without engaging executive function. The active effect labeling produces a dramatic, measurable increase in activity within a specific region called the right ventrolateral prefrontal cortex.
Or the RVLTFC?
Yes, the RVLPFC.
So that specific region is the light switch in the dark room.
Yes, and the crucial finding is that the activity in the RVLPFC is inversely correlated with amygdala activity.
Meaning as one goes up, the other goes down.
Exactly. It is a biological seesaw. As the RVLPFC activates to label the emotion, the amygdala deactivates.
That's amazing.
In fact, supervised machine learning models analyzing this fMRI data have demonstrated that the interaction between the RVLPFC and the amygdala is a top predictor of real-world improvements in outcomes related to severe depression and overall life satisfaction.
That is astounding. So when you choose to validate instead of fix, you aren't just being polite. I think Dr. Lieberman says it is like hitting the brakes on your emotional reactions.
Yes, that's his quote.
You are physically altering the blood flow and electrical activity in their brain. You teach their dysregulated brain that feelings are manageable data points, not life-threatening emergencies.
You directly facilitate the return of their executive function.
Which is exactly what they need.
But the intervention goes even deeper than just linguistic processing. There is a profound physical and autonomic component to holding space, which is best understood through polyvagal theory.
Ah, Dr. Stephen Porges's work. This completely shifted how the psychological community understands trauma and safety.
It really did. Polyvagal theory focuses on autonomic regulation. It details how our autonomic nervous system, which controls our heart rate, breathing, and digestion, organizes our physiological states in response to our environment and our social interactions.
For a long time, we just talked about the nervous system as a two-part switch, right? Like fight or flight or rest and digest.
Yes, the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. But Dr. Porges introduced a more nuanced, hierarchical evolutionary model based on the vagus nerve.
Right, the vagus nerve.
The vagus nerve is a massive cranial nerve that wanders from the brainstem down through the neck, chest, and abdomen, connecting to major organs.
It's like a superhighway.
Exactly. And according to polyvagal theory, human beings possess a subconscious surveillance mechanism called neuroception.
Neuroception. It sounds like perception, but I'm guessing it's happening entirely beneath our conscious awareness.
Exactly right. It is a continuous, automatic process of scanning the environment, detecting subtle cues of safety, danger, or life threat.
Okay.
When an individual is in severe distress, their neuroception detects danger and shifts their autonomic state into defensive platforms.
Like what?
This could be sympathetic mobilization, the classic fight or flight, marked by panic and anxiety. Or if the threat feels inescapable, it can shift into dorsal vagal immobilization.
What does dorsal vagal immobilization look like in a person?
That is the evolutionary oldest defensive response. It looks like shutdown, collapse, dissociation, or severe depression.
Oh, wow.
Heart rate drops, the metabolism slows, the body is essentially feigning death to survive a predator.
And clearly, if a person's nervous system is in fight, flight, or shutdown, their brain's capacity for complex problem solving is zero.
Absolutely zero.
They are purely in survival mode.
But here is the biological miracle of human connection. We possess a newer, repurposed neural circuit originating in the mammalian brainstem. It's called the ventral vagal complex.
Okay, the ventral vagal complex. What does that do?
Activation of the ventral vagal complex provides a neural platform for feelings of safety, calmness, and social engagement.
Nice.
And crucially, it allows us to downregulate our innate threat reactions through proximity to a safe, trusted individual.
Okay, this is the concept of co-regulation. I find this absolutely fascinating.
It's brilliant.
It is the idea that our nervous systems are basically communicating with each other via an invisible biological Wi-Fi network.
Co-regulation is a biological imperative baked deep into human evolutionary history. It is the reciprocal sending and receiving of signals of safety between two mammalian nervous systems.
So translate this to the living room couch scenario. When my partner is venting, and I resist the urge to jump in with my toolbox of fixes, when I just sit there with a grounded, regulated physical presence, I am literally broadcasting biological signals of safety to their neuroception.
You are, through specific measurable cues.
Like what?
Your prosodic voice tone, for one, which is the melodic, soothing quality of your speech, avoiding harsh or sharp pitches.
Okay.
Your relaxed facial expressions, particularly the muscles around the eyes, and your measured, slow breathing. These physical realities are detected by the distressed person's neuroception, and it activates their ventral vagal complex.
You are physically stabilizing their internal organs just by being calm and present.
Yes, their body responds unconsciously, the threat responses soften, autonomic flexibility increases, and we see a stabilization in their respiratory sinus arrhythmia, or RSA.
Okay, let's explain that like I'm 5. What is respiratory sinus arrhythmia and why does it matter?
It sounds complex, but it's a very simple measure of vagal tone. When you breathe in, your heart rate naturally speeds up a little bit. When you breathe out, your heart rate slows down.
Right, I've noticed that.
That slowing down on the exhale is caused by the vagus nerve applying a literal brake to the heart. The natural variation in time between heartbeats as you breathe in and out is your RSA.
So a healthy, flexible nervous system has a strong vagal brake.
Yes. High RSA indicates that the ventral vagal complex is efficiently regulating the heart, keeping the person calm.
Makes sense?
But when someone is panicking, that vagal brake comes off and the heart races. By offering your own calm presence, your co-regulation physically helps reapply their vagal brake.
Oh, so holding space is a profound, literal act of physiological stabilization. You provide the biological scaffolding for their nervous system to climb out of threat and back into safety.
Exactly. And when we combine that physiological stabilization with the linguistic processing of affect labeling we talked about, we reach the ultimate pinnacle of interpersonal connection,
Which is?
neural entrainment.
Ah, yes. The research from Dr. Yuri Hassan at Princeton regarding neural entrainment is incredible. It provides physical evidence that communication literally aligns our brains.
Dr. Hassan's lab utilized fMRI to scan the brains of speakers, telling real-life stories, and then scan the brains of listeners, hearing those stories.
Okay.
They discovered that when a listener actively engages in deep empathetic comprehension, and this is the key, without attempting to mentally hijack the narrative with their own solutions or judgments.
Right, without the writing reflex.
Yes, their brain responses become spatially and temporally locked to the speaker's brain.
The imaging literally shows that as words and emotions emerge and light up specific high-order cortical areas in the speaker's brain, those exact same regions light up in the listener's brain with a slight delay. You become neurally entrained.
The brain's function, for that brief window, as a single unified system.
That is almost like sci-fi.
It feels like it. And the depth of this neural coupling is intrinsically linked to how comprehensively the listener understands the emotional and conceptual nuances of the narrative.
So the better you listen, the more synced you are.
Right. When you successfully entrain, it generates that profound, undeniable sense of connection we colloquially refer to as clicking with someone.
Oh, I love that feeling.
Our brains have evolved to crave this synchronization. It was historically necessary for community building, mutual understanding, and collective survival.
But here is the catch. And this is the exact reason why the Fix It Reflex absolutely destroys connection. Entrainment is biologically impossible if you aren't matching your frequency, isn't it?
Exactly. Think about the functional regions of the brain. If the distressed individual is desperately trying to process a profound emotional experience, they are heavily utilizing the emotional, affective, and memory centers of the brain.
Right.
But if you immediately respond to their distress by deploying the writing reflex, you're activating the practical, logical, and executive centers of your brain.
You are operating on entirely different neurological frequencies.
Yes.
You are trying to tune in to an AM logical problem-solving station, while they are broadcasting on an FM emotional distress station.
That's a great way to put it.
If you try to force the connection without changing the dial, all you will get is static. You have to intentionally match the emotional state of the speaker, validate the FM station, to grant permission for the brains to synchronize.
Understanding the science behind this is empowering, but we really have to bridge the gap between theory and practice.
Definitely.
Knowing the mechanics of the RVLPFC, or the vagus nerve, isn't enough when you're in the chaotic heat of a tearful conversation.
Right. It's one thing to understand the Wi-Fi network, it's another to know the password. How do we actually stop our automatic biology from taking over? Like, how do we build a tangible validation before fixation habit?
It requires the deliberate implementation of structured psychological frameworks. We had to violently disrupt the automatic reflex, and the fundamental mechanism for doing that is engineering a cognitive pause.
This draws on the famous concept articulated by Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor. He observed that between a stimulus and a response, there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom and our power to choose our response.
In the context of emotional validation, the stimulus is your friend's expression of intense distress.
Okay.
The automated biological response is your urge to offer a solution to alleviate your own vicarious discomfort.
Right, the writing reflex.
By implementing a mandatory intentional pause before speaking, you manually interrupt the automaticity of your nervous system.
You step off cognitive autopilot. You bypass your own biological biases and short-circuit that cultural stress cycle of the quick fix.
That pause creates a literal, measurable space and time. It affords you the critical milliseconds required to explicitly notice your own effective responses.
Like checking in with yourself.
Exactly. During that pause, you might internally observe, my heart rate is elevated. I'm feeling a surge of anxiety. I really want to tell them to quit their job right now.
Yeah, naming your own feeling.
And in the act of noticing that internal state, you can critically evaluate your conversational tactics. You transition from a state of blind reacting to a state of proceeding with mindful, regulated awareness.
It is a deliberate action rooted in conscious wisdom. So we take the breath. We engineer the pause. We stop the writing reflex from leaping out of our mouths.
Right.
But the silence can't last forever. What do we actually say? How do we actively validate them to turn on that prefrontal cortex light switch?
The most comprehensive and highly regarded clinical framework for this comes from Dr. Marsha Linehan, the creator of dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT.
DBT is huge.
She formulated 6 distinct, escalating levels of validation.
Mastering these 6 levels allows you to meet the person precisely where they are neurologically. Let's explore these because they function like a ladder of connection.
Let's do it.
Let's start at the base. Level 1 is simply being present.
Being present is the absolute, non-negotiable foundation. It requires offering undivided, sustained attention. You maintain a regulated physical presence. You listen without interrupting, without glancing at your phone, without multitasking, and crucially, without internally preparing your brilliant rebuttal or your solution while they're speaking.
It sounds so basic, but it is incredibly rare, just giving someone your pure focus. And as we discussed with polyvagal theory, this level alone signals autonomic safety to their neuroception.
It is the prerequisite for all subsequent levels. Once presence is established, we move to level 2, accurate reflection.
What does that mean?
Here, the listener restates or summarizes the core of the speaker's narrative without adding any interpretations, moral judgments, or solutions.
So if we go back to the friend complaining about work, accurate reflection looks like saying, so you're saying your boss completely ignored your presentation in front of the whole executive team after you spent 3 weeks preparing it.
Exactly. It acts as an unclouded psychological mirror. It proves definitively to the speaker that their words and external experiences have been accurately received and documented by you.
Simple, but powerful. Then we climb to level 3, reading the behavior. This one can feel a bit intimidating, almost like attempting to mind read. How do we do this safely?
It is not mind reading, it is attuned observation.
Okay.
It involves articulating unstated emotions based on nonverbal cues. You observe their body language, the tension in their shoulders, the specific tone of their voice, and you gently guess what they might be experiencing internally.
And by doing this, you are actively assisting them in effect labeling. You are offering them the language they might be too flooded to find themselves.
Yes. You might say, you sound incredibly exhausted by all of this. Or, I can see how tense your hands are. It seems like you're feeling really defeated.
You're helping to downregulate that amygdala by offering linguistic structure.
Precisely.
I love that. And it leads beautifully into level 4, validating by history. I think this is one of the most powerful tools in the entire framework because it leverages context.
Validating by history requires you to explicitly justify their current emotional reaction within the broader context of their past experiences, their unique biology, or their trauma history.
Okay.
You communicate that their emotional response, even if it seems outsized to an outsider, makes perfect logical sense given their specific life trajectory.
So using our example, you might say, Given how your last job ended with that incredibly toxic manager constantly undermining you, it makes complete sense that you are on edge and terrified about this new supervisor ignoring your presentation.
That's a perfect example.
It removes the feeling that they are overreacting. It grounds their emotion in historical logic.
It is incredibly affirming, and it brings us to level 5, normalizing.
Normalizing.
Here, you broaden the scope. You recognize and state that the emotional reaction is a universal normative response to the specific situation at hand. This level is specifically designed to combat shame.
Shame is such a massive part of distress. When we are upset, we often have a secondary layer of anxiety where we feel like we are crazy or weak for being upset in the first place.
Normalizing confirms that anyone placed in a similar circumstance would likely experience the exact same neurobiological flooding.
Right.
You might say, anyone would feel terrified and furious waiting for those test results. Or, it is completely normal to feel paralyzed when dealing with a boss like that. You universalize the experience.
Which brings us to the pinnacle of the ladder, level 6, radical genuineness.
This is the highest echelon of interpersonal connection. At level 6, the listener responds as an authentic, profoundly equal human being.
What does that look like?
You discard any clinical veneer, any artificial detachment, or any subtle power dynamics of being the helper. You share in the raw human experience without treating the distressed individual as fragile, pathological, or broken.
This actually addresses a major concern I had when reading through these clinical frameworks.
What's that?
Because this ladder sounds incredibly effective, but if you aren't careful, how do you avoid sounding like a robotic therapist reading from a script? Level 6 is the antidote to that. It is about raw human-to-human presence.
Exactly. It is entirely appropriate and highly validating to drop the clinical language and simply say, wow, that is so utterly unfair, and it makes me angry just hearing about it. I don't even know what to say, but I am so glad you told me.
By systematically navigating these levels, you establish an impenetrable fortress of psychological safety. The conversational focus remains entirely on processing the emotion, completely subverting the urge to pivot toward a premature fix.
And to maintain the momentum of that conversation without reverting to problem solving, motivational interviewing offers a complementary conversational structure known as the ORS framework.
ORARS. Open questions, affirmations, reflective listening, summaries.
These are specific interaction techniques that foster an environment where the individual resolves their own ambivalence. Open questions that cannot be answered with a simple yes or no invite the speaker to explore their inner world, rather than you leading them down a narrow path to your preconceived solution.
So what was the hardest part of that meeting for you, instead of, are you going to quit?
Precisely. Affirmations build self-efficacy by intentionally highlighting their inherent strengths and past successes. It focuses their brain on what they're doing right, rather than their perceived deficits.
Okay, that's the A.
Reflective listening ensures neural entrainment is maintained. And summaries help consolidate the conversation, helping the speaker organize their chaotic thoughts, which further engages their prefrontal cortex and keeps the momentum firmly in their control.
We have covered so much deep neuroscience and complex conversational theory, but I want to pivot to the most actionable everyday application of this deep dive.
Let's do it.
Because if you are listening to this right now, you might be thinking, this is fascinating, but what specific concrete tools can I start using today? What do I do tonight when my partner comes home stressed out and starts pacing the kitchen?
We need to look at triaging conversational needs. Because while emotional validation is the universal non-negotiable prerequisite, there are absolutely instances where an individual genuinely desires a practical solution.
Right. Sometimes we really do just want the hammer.
Exactly.
If my car is broken down on the side of the highway, I don't need you to validate my sadness about the engine. I need you to help me call a tow truck.
The breakdown in communication and the resulting relational friction almost always arises from a fundamental mismatch in the type of support being offered versus the type of support being sought.
Okay.
Charles Duhigg's extensive research on supercommunicators identifies this dynamic perfectly. Aligning the hidden goals of the conversation is paramount for neurological synchronization.
He categorizes fundamental human conversational needs into 3 distinct modes: heard, hugged, or helped.
Let's delineate those. Heard is fundamentally about emotional venting and cognitive processing. The individual seeks to narrate their experience. They want to air their grievances. They want to say, isn't this horrible? And they desire pure validation.
So for a heard conversation, you provide active presence, you utilize those 6 levels of validation we just discussed, and you strictly, fiercely withhold any solutions.
Yes. Hugged is centered on emotional comfort, physical presence, and relational safety. In this mode, the individual is exhibiting significant emotional vulnerability, exhaustion, or overwhelm. They might not even want to discuss the mechanics of the problem verbally.
This is where you rely heavily on autonomic co-regulation. You provide a steady presence, physical comfort if appropriate and welcomed, and you just let your grounded, well-regulated nervous system slowly calm theirs down via neuroception.
And finally, helped. This is concrete problem-solving, strategic planning, and definitive action. The individual is oriented toward the future and explicitly asks, "What do I do?" or "How do we fix this?" They are actively soliciting solutions.
And it is absolutely critical to understand. Only in this explicitly requested helped mode are you granted permission to open your toolbox, offer advice, and engage your writing reflex productively.
Therefore, to eliminate friction and guarantee neural alignment from the very beginning of an interaction, you must establish the habit of asking a mandatory clarifying triage question.
This is an incredibly powerful mindset shift. You need to hardwire this question into your brain.
Yes.
When someone comes to you upset, you take your frankel pause, you regulate your own breathing, and then you warmly, clearly ask, are we in a space to just vent right now, or are we looking to brainstorm solutions together?
By asking that explicit triage question, you accomplish two crucial things. First, you return total agency to the distressed individual, empowering them to dictate their own needs.
Which is huge for their autonomy.
Second, you prevent the neural mismatch that disrupts entrainment, ensuring that both of your brains are participating in the exact same type of conversation.
Are we venting or are we brainstorming? It is so simple, yet it completely rewires the interaction. But let's be honest.
Yeah.
Even if they say, I just want to vent, and you intellectually know you shouldn't fix it, your biology is still going to be screaming at you to solve the problem. The tension will still build.
It absolutely will.
Which leads us to an incredibly effective cognitive tool, the Locked Toolbox visualization.
Because the writing reflex operates automatically at a subconscious level, cognitive visualizations are highly effective interventions to interrupt the motor response and bind the urge.
I want to guide you through this vividly because visualizing it changes how it feels.
Okay, set the scene.
Imagine this scenario. Someone you deeply care about starts venting to you about a crisis. The tension rises. Immediately, I want you to picture a heavy, solid, industrial steel toolbox in your mind's eye.
A really heavy one.
See the heavy padlocks on it, feel how dense and heavy it is. Inside that specific toolbox are all of your brilliant pieces of advice, your strategic step-by-step plans, your logical fixes, your past experiences. Everything that could solve their problem is in the box.
As the individual speaks, your primary cognitive task, your active duty in the conversation, is to focus on keeping the lid of that toolbox firmly shut.
Okay.
It acts as a psychological anchor, intentionally binding your problem-solving faculties so they don't interfere with your listening faculties.
Your only job is to guard the locked box. You commit to a singular, unwavering rule. The toolbox remains locked, and no tools are handed over unless the speaker explicitly asks to be helped during that initial triage question.
This practice is profoundly effective because it externalizes the urge to fix. It allows you to consciously observe your own biological desire to intervene without acting upon it. You acknowledge the urge, put it in the box, and return your focus to the speaker.
I think this visualization is incredibly liberating because it protects the listener from the guilt of not doing enough.
Oh, totally.
When you just sit and listen, you often feel useless, but guarding the box changes the narrative. You are doing something incredibly difficult. You're expending massive cognitive effort holding a heavy box shut.
Right.
It takes profound stamina, but by keeping those tools locked away, you preserve the pristine, non-judgmental space they desperately need for effective validation.
However, we must acknowledge the physical reality of this effort. Holding this heavy toolbox shut while simultaneously engaging in empathic resonance and neural mirroring requires immense emotional stamina.
It is exhausting.
Listening is not a passive activity. It is an active, demanding neurological process that forces your nervous system to process their pain.
Which, as we discussed earlier, can rapidly deplete our cognitive resources and lead to burnout.
Exactly. To prevent this empathic resonance from devolving into vicarious trauma, and to make holding space a sustainable practice, we have to reach our final neurobiological upgrade.
What's that?
We must transition from empathy to compassion.
Wait, empathy and compassion are used interchangeably in casual conversation all the time? They aren't the same thing.
Neuroscientifically, they are distinctly, fundamentally different experiences with entirely different biological signatures.
Really?
Yes. The Resource Project, which was a massive, groundbreaking longitudinal study conducted by Tanya Singer at the Max Planck Institute, clearly delineates this crucial biological distinction.
Let's explore the findings of the Resource Project. What is empathy doing to the brain versus compassion?
Empathy involves feeling the specific distress of the other person. As we noted, it activates the brain's pain matrix regions like the anterior insula and the mid-cingulate cortex, as well as the amygdala.
Right, the threat center.
When empathy is left unchecked and unregulated, it leads to empathic distress, overwhelm, and ultimately that egoistic desire to fix the problem just to escape the shared pain.
So empathy, in its raw form, is actually the biological trigger for the righting reflex. It is the source of the burnout.
Yes. Compassion, on the other hand, is neurologically entirely different.
How so?
Compassion involves feelings of warmth, concern, and a strong prosocial motivation to care for the other person, but without absorbing their suffering as your own. Compassion activates the brain's affiliative networks, the positive emotion centers, and the reward networks, such as the ventral striatum.
So empathy exhausts you and burns you out because you are simulating pain, but compassion is actually biologically regenerative because it activates reward pathways.
Precisely. Compassion aligns with deep care for both the self and the other, without necessitating a fix to relieve your own tension.
That is beautiful.
To make this neurobiological transition from empathy to compassion, the listener must deliberately maintain a secure boundary of self-other distinction. You must actively remind your nervous system that while you care deeply, their distress is not your distress.
You have to stay firmly anchored in your own regulated autonomic state. You leverage your own ventral vagal complex to stay calm, observing their storm without getting swept away by it.
By maintaining that self-other distinction, you transform the passive, painful absorption of their pain into the active, regenerative provision of safety. Holding space evolves from a burdensome endurance test into an act of profound, sustainable compassion.
I love the imagery of this. Holding space with compassion is standing firmly on the shore, extending an unbreakable lifeline of regulated presence and validation to someone struggling in the water.
Yes.
It is not jumping into the freezing water and drowning in the emotional storm with them. You are no good to them if you are drowning too.
But we have to recognize the ultimate barrier here. The final obstacle to abandoning the righting reflex and standing firmly on that shore is often the listener's own deeply ingrained internal narrative regarding their self-worth.
This hits incredibly hard. Because in our relentless fix-it culture, we are so rigorously conditioned to believe that our value is inextricably linked to our utility.
We really are.
We believe we are only as good as our ability to provide answers, to resolve crises, to manufacture tangible solutions.
When an individual is asked to surrender their tools, to simply sit in silence, validate, and listen without offering a single piece of advice, they frequently experience a profound sense of uselessness, passivity, or inadequacy. They feel they are failing the person they love.
And that is exactly why we are ending this deep dive with a core cognitive reframe. We need to completely rewrite that internal narrative. You need to deeply internalize the astonishing neurobiological reality of what your presence actually achieves.
It is so important.
Your regulated presence is not a secondary consolation prize you offer when you aren't smart enough to find a solution.
Yeah.
It is the most sophisticated, biologically potent, highly calibrated intervention you can possibly provide.
To anchor this reality and protect your neurobiological resources, it is essential to utilize a specific grounding affirmation.
I want you to really hear this.
Yeah.
I want you to memorize it and repeat it to yourself the very next time you feel the tension rising and the urge to fix taking over. I do not need to fix their problem to be valuable. My presence, my empathy, and my listening ear are the most powerful, transformative tools I have.
This affirmation is vital because it directly aligns your psychological intent with your actual neurobiological capacity. It dismantles the cultural pressure to perform and replaces it with the profound permission to simply connect.
You are already fully equipped. Just by being a grounded, attentive, validating you, offering undivided attention, you provide the linguistic bridge for their panicked amygdala to calm down.
You do.
You broadcast autonomic signals of safety directly to their nervous system. You foster the neural entrainment that synchronizes two minds. You are quite literally physically altering someone else's brain chemistry for the better.
The pervasive human instinct to rapidly resolve emotional suffering is entirely understandable. It is a deeply biological manifestation of our interconnectedness, our care, and our shared distress.
Yeah.
But overriding this reflex is not merely about adopting improved, polite conversational etiquette. It is a vital, transformative neurobiological intervention that shifts a relationship from mutual dysregulation to profound healing.
We have covered so much critical ground today. We have learned that the writing reflex is just our own nervous system panicking and selfishly trying to escape discomfort. But by utilizing Viktor Frankl's cognitive pause, visualizing that heavy locked toolbox, and establishing the habit of asking the crucial triage question, are we venting or brainstorming, we can stop that reflex in its tracks. We can transition from exhausting empathy to regenerative compassion, initiate neural entrainment, and turn on the prefrontal cortex lights for the people we care about.
By shifting your default mode from fixation to validation, you unlock a profound intrinsic capacity to heal the human mind through the sheer power of empathetic, regulated presence. And this journey raises one final, critical question to consider long after we finish.
Let's hear it.
We spend this entire time analyzing how we respond to the distress of others. But consider your relationship with yourself.
Oh, wow.
If the fix-it reflex invalidates the emotions of a friend, short-circuiting their processing, what happens when you ruthlessly apply it to your own mind? What if, the next time you feel sad, overwhelmed, or anxious, instead of immediately rushing to fix yourself or eradicate the feeling, you just sat down, locked your own internal toolbox, and offered yourself that same profound, radically genuine validation?
Your journey, your tools. It's the strength to build anew. It's the light to guide you through. It's the choice to find your way. Starting here, starting today.
As we wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you with this liberating truth. You do not have to have all the answers. In fact, letting go of the need to fix everything isn't just a relief for you. It is a profound gift to the people you love. Remember, when someone comes to you in distress, their brain isn't looking for a mechanic. It's looking for a safe harbor. Listening is the action. Presence is the fix. So, your mission this week is simple but incredibly powerful. Visualize that locked toolbox. When a friend, a partner, or a colleague starts sharing a struggle, picture that heavy lid snapping shut and the padlock clicking into place. Take a breath, lean in, and ask the magic question. Are we in a space to just vent right now, or are we looking to brainstorm solutions? You already have the greatest tool you will ever need to support the people around you, and it's your capacity to simply hold space. You don't need to fix their problem to be valuable. Your empathy is enough. You are enough. If today's episode helped you unlock a new perspective, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss a tool, and keep building those neuro pathways of connection. Until next time, keep the toolbox locked, keep your heart open, and keep navigating your journey, your tools.